The problem with articles like this is you understand how we get some of the most ridiculous claims out here. Basically, Taylor Swift was booed in the just concluded Super Bowl for 2 reasons. One, she grew up in Pennsylvania. Her and her dad were lifelong Eagles fans, until Taylor started dating Kels, then they switched to the Chiefs. No fan base would take that lightly. Well, not exactly sure how things go as it pertains to matters Formula 1, since it looks kinda different to other sports. But people get more than booed for switching teams, so why would this be different? Because she's a woman? Second, there's been a lot of hate towards the Chiefs by all non-Chief fans for a wide range of reasons.
People hate the Chiefs? I didn't know that. Why are you guys leaning into this whole ref thing? You know, why are you guys leaning into it?
Shut up, bitch!
Why football fans, non-Chiefs fans, hate the Chiefs? It is so frustrating as a non-Chiefs fan that at the end of every single game, in the most pivotal moment, something goes their way. It doesn't make sense. As a non-Chiefs fan, we watch because they're in prime time every single week. So non-Chiefs fans see a lot of Chiefs games. Every single close game, something pivotal goes their way that hands them the win.
The Chiefs are not making the playoffs. Raiders are going to win. Chargers are going to get in as well in that wild card spot because I think the Chargers are going to be nice. They're not even making the playoffs. You, Travis Kelce.
Isn't it one of those things where the Chiefs had one of those seasons where everyone's like, are they dead? Is it over? Are they finally the lack of talent at wide receiver, the drops, all that stuff? Is Travis Kelce too focused on Taylor Swift type of deal? And now all of a sudden we're back in the AFC Championship again. Like how much longer can the world doubt Patrick Mahomes?
Every great dynasty that spends too long at the top eventually faces the wrath of every other bitter franchise's fan base. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and company have officially become the villain of the NFL, picking up right where Tom Brady left off. The trajectory of an elite athlete is always the same. Their come up is celebrated. Patrick Mahomes' immediate emergence as a standout quarterback was a ton of fun for everybody who appreciated the NFL. But the come up starts to fade fast, especially if they're winning too much. Patrick Mahomes has done nothing but win, so now fans are starting to hate him for it. And I mean, hell, it's not even Mahomes just himself. People hate his wife too. Add in his brother and his TikTok page that has annoyed the NFL and fans for years, that just makes it even worse. That's all not even mentioning Travis Kelce and his new girlfriend, Taylor Swift. I mean, they've literally become the latest marketing campaign for the NFL. The NFL is just so happy that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are back in the Super Bowl. And needless to say, that's really pissed off a good amount of fans. But how did it come to this? What does it really take for the hero to become the villain? Winning is certainly a major part of it. Patrick Mahomes has now made it to 6 straight AFC Championship games since becoming the Chiefs starting quarterback and winning 4 of those to advance to the Super Bowl. He's got 2 rings and may have a 3rd one by the time you're watching this video. But some quarterbacks take a lick and just get on with the next play. Some have plays that go against them and simply blow their heads and leave the field. Patrick Mahomes has become notorious for complaining to the referees on just about every call that doesn't go exactly as he had hoped it would. I mean, it's actually insane. If a flag isn't thrown downfield and Mahomes believes that there should have been one, or even if DeWiddle baby is touched just a tad bit late, the dude's going to let the refs know about it. I mean, it's an absolute bad habit, and sports fans are starting to take notice on it. He'll be all in the referee's personal space with that look of the spoiled child on his face, demanding answers as to why the flag wasn't thrown several times a game. He expects to get the call now, and when he doesn't, he's not happy about it. I mean, take the Buffalo game for example. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs had a touchdown ripped off the board on what would have been an all-time great play in which Travis Kelce lateraled the ball to Kadarius Toney for a score. It would have been the difference in the game, but was pulled back because Toney had lined up offsides. And when the game was over, Mahomes launched his helmet and had to be restrained by several teammates as he let the referees hear it as to what he thought of the decision. He then made it clear to Josh Allen that he thought it was a terrible call when they shook hands at the 50-yard line.
Offensive offside. Fucking terrible. Fucking worst call I've ever fucking seen, man.
And spoke about it relentlessly in the post-game press conference.
How delusional would you be to suggest that Swift was booed just for being a woman by tying it to misogyny? It's the same line of thinking they'll tell that women need to participate fully in public life, while constantly being afforded extra protection just for being women. The same thing they'll tell you about a woman losing a political seat just for being a woman, or just because of her gender.
And I love you back. And I love you back. So let me say, my heart is full today. My heart is full today, full of gratitude for the trust you have placed in me, full of love for our country, and full of resolve. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up, and as long as we keep fighting. To my beloved Doug and our family, I love you so very much. To President Biden and Dr. Biden, thank you for your faith and support. To Governor Walz and the Walz family, I know your service to our nation will continue. And to my extraordinary team, to the volunteers who gave so much of themselves, to the poll workers and the local election officials, I thank you all.
Like, even when they saw her struggle with answering some of the most basic questions a presidential candidate should be comfortable with, even after they saw her constantly being spoon-fed in interviews and the carefully elected media tours that she did.
And your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places they've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon.
Even after they saw whatever she brought out in her rallies in the name of supporting her campaign, they still believe she lost because she's a woman.
Harris took aim at Donald Trump in front of the cheering crowd, challenging him to a debate.
So last week, you may have seen, he pulled out of the debate in September he had previously agreed to. Here's the funny thing about that. So he won't debate, but he and his running mate sure seem to have a lot to say about me. And by the way, don't you find some of their stuff to just be plain weird? Well, Donald, you'll reconsider to meet me on the debate stage. Because as the saying goes, if you've got something to say, say it to my face.
Did you see this? Again, in even the most softball forum, Harris was left grasping for answers, laughing nervously, and repeating the same set pieces that have been running her entire mini campaign.
One of the greatest expressions for the love of our country, one of the greatest expressions of patriotism, is to fight for the ideals of who we are, which includes freedom to make decisions about your own body, freedom to be safe from gun violence, freedom to have access.
The purpose of the forum was for Harris to be asked some very basic questions which she still struggled with, even though they're entirely predictable. Here she was being asked about what she'd do about the border.
When you become president, what would be your specific steps? Yeah, of course. What would be specific steps to strengthening the border?
So it's a wonderful and important question. You know, my background was as a prosecutor, and I was also the elected attorney general for 2 terms of a border state. So this is not a theoretical issue for me. Right. Is it about running on problems or fixing problems? My work and my career has always been about saying, let's fix problems. Let's address the needs, because we know it's within our capacity to do that.
So to answer Justin's question, now that that bill has gone and hasn't passed, will you reintroduce that?
Harris also got a completely unexpected, why in the world would anybody ask the question about the cost of living? And she got it from this young couple. Check out the panic in her eyes and the total non-answer.
Groceries are extremely expensive right now.
I don't understand how people are affording life right now.
By a long shot, her tax plan is phenomenal. No glaze.
Kamala Harris just delivered her new economic plan, and boy, oh boy, is it good for small business owners.
You guys, Kamala Harris is going to announce tomorrow a $25,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers.
We really would love to know what your plan is to help lower the cost of living.
Yeah, first of all, thank you both for being here. And yours is a story I hear around the country as I travel. And in terms of both rightly having the right to have aspirations and dreams and ambitions for your family, and working hard and finding that the American dream is, for this generation and so many recently, far more elusive than it's been. And we need to deal with that. And there are a number of ways. One is bringing down the cost of everyday necessities, including groceries. I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot.
Yes, I hear that. I hear that.
Probably should not have said that. But my staff will deal with that later.
Yeah. You know, she's always on about being a prosecutor, but you know how great a record she had as a prosecutor? Remember this from when Tulsi Gabbard absolutely eviscerated her back in 2020?
I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. That would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California.
That pretty much blew her out of the 2020 primary, and yet she's still talking about what a great prosecutor she was.
Make no mistake about it, this was a commercial. It was an ad disguised as an interview.
This is going to be won by a field margin. It's on us to roll up our sleeves and do the work. Let's make phone calls and knock on doors. Go to go.kamalaharris.com to join this people-powered movement.
I am a mother of 2 kids. This is their first chance to vote in an election, and I couldn't be more excited for them.
And I love Julia Roberts as an actress. I think she is divine. But even some of the best actors in the world could not disguise the reality. Have a look at this.
I want people to say, oh, you're American? And not, oh, how's it going over there?
Julia, Kamala's currently in power. She's been there for over 3 years, so she clearly hasn't managed to shift that attitude.
But this whole campaign really revealed Kamala Harris to be an entirely empty vessel without an original thought in her head, which the media doesn't care about, frankly, because they just want to evict Trump so badly from the political scene.
In Georgia, jubilation. It was the economy and immigration, not abortion, that defined this election.
So, but how are you doing today?
I just feel like I'm in a fever dream. Like this, I feel exactly how I did in 2016.
In Atlanta, Democrats are crestfallen.
Are you surprised she didn't do better with female voters?
The disparity for the results is shocking, for sure. I think that's the most shocking part of it. Just how much more we needed to have gotten her elected.
Kamala Harris took a risk putting reproductive rights at the top of her agenda. It didn't deliver. Yes, there were some wins, restrictive abortion bans undone in 7 states, but activists feel abandoned.
I feel let down, honestly, by, first and foremost, white women voters in this country. White women in this particular election in 2024, at least in the presidential realm, voted at almost the exact same rate that they voted for the same person who is a convicted felon and the very person who is proudly telling you that he snatched away your reproductive rights.
In so many rural and suburban areas, though, it was other anxieties that dominated.
Why couldn't Democrats win over women like you?
I don't think she ever talked about anything that were the points that meant the most to me. The economy, the immigration, the crime that came with the immigration.
Are you ready for a female president.
A woman who served at a high rank in the military might very well make a good president. But a woman who's been a prosecutor in a very left state, I don't think so.
The gender gap did play out in the election results. Women did favour Kamala Harris, but not nearly enough to cement her victory.
How delusional can people really be? The same thinking that gets you the argument that women are paid less just for being women.
And despite the fact that no credible economist takes it seriously, huge media companies persist on bringing it up as a fact. But I came across a few videos that try to convince people that employees earn less solely based on gender. And next thing you know, I have all these videos recommended to me trying to explain why the gender pay gap is real, while they're pretty much debunking their own arguments when trying to explain it. And it was the weirdest, most conflicting little video binging I've been on for a while. So I'm sitting here listening to this absolute dribble, and mind you, these are not posted by some random people, but huge media and news organizations.
The women in this country still make 77 cents on the dollar for what men make. So if women don't make less than men?
Actually, if you start looking at the numbers, Rachel, there are lots of reasons for that.
Wait.
Well,
don't tell me the reasons are. Do women make less than men for doing the same work?
No, because...
Wow.
Well,
okay.
87 cents. That's how much a woman working full-time makes for every dollar or euro a man makes, on average across the OECD. This gender wage gap is a stubborn problem. And it gets even wider when we talk about the total earnings women and men take home in a year, because women tend to spend fewer hours in paid work than men do.
According to equal pay activists, the difference in men's and women's salaries means women in the UK are effectively working for free from early November until the beginning of January. The UK's gender pay gap for full-time workers stands at nearly 9.4%, figures from the ONS show. That gap has narrowed slightly over the past year, but disparities in earnings for women continue, and many professional women feel strongly about it.
The gender pay gap isn't just about women getting what it is that they're rightfully entitled to. It's about also educating employers about how they can ensure that they are treating all their employees fairly.
I think the men are much more willing to fight their corner when it comes to pay and actually trying to challenge the status quo.
The pay imbalance exists worldwide. And since October, when Microsoft Chief Executive Satya Nadella backtracked on his suggestion that women rely on good karma to get a pay rise, debate has escalated about why the pay gap matters and what needs to be done.
We've seen huge progress in closing the gender pay gap from 64 cents on the dollar a few decades ago to 82 cents on the dollar now. So that obviously represents huge progress by women in the labour market. It's obvious when we think about it for a moment that that doesn't mean all women earn less than all men. And when we look quite hard at the picture, what we see is that 40% of women now earn more than the median man, which was only 13% in 1979. Imagine a world where the earnings of women and men looked exactly the same. It would be 50%. So we're not at 50% of women earning the same as the median man, but we're at 40%. And so what that means is there are a lot of women who are earning quite a lot more than a lot of men. And that's great news. What that means is that we're getting closer and closer to gender equality, even if we haven't got there yet in terms of earning.
All right. On another issue, what is the gender workplace hours gap? The agency reports a workplace gender pay gap comparing male full-time employees and female full-time employees. But male full-time employees work longer hours on average than female full-time employees. And the agency doesn't account for this when reporting a workplace gender pay gap.
Using ABS data on employee earnings and hours, the gender pay gap as at May 2016 was 15.7%. It is a survey of employees, that information from the ABS. It's not a census. And it's only conducted every 2 years. They only collect the data every 2 years. What we do is we annualise our figure to full-time. So we look at all part-time employees and full-time employees that may have worked part of a 12-month period, and we annualise that data to take into account part-time hours. So therefore we're converting the part-time hours to full-time, if you like.
So
Women who work full-time still earn 15% less than men. But that's not because they're paid less for the same jobs. It's because they're in different jobs. Women are in less senior jobs. In Britain, France, and Germany, 80 to 90% of executive jobs are held by men. Women also tend to choose different occupations. In America, over 80% of teachers, nurses, secretaries, and health workers are female, and these jobs tend to be lower paid. Primary school teachers in the West earn nearly 20% less than the average graduate job. Nurses earn less than police officers, cleaners less than caretakers. Women are as ambitious as men. They earn the majority of university degrees. In America, they now ask for promotions as often as men, but it's the price women pay for motherhood that holds them back. In Britain, 70% of mothers reduce their working hours or switch to a less demanding job, compared with 11% of fathers. In Australia, it's 56% of mothers and 19% of fathers. While in France, 55% of mothers scale back, compared with 13% of fathers. When an American woman goes back to work, her salary is on average lower than it would have been if she hadn't had a child.
The question then becomes, why is the gap there? Why was it there before? Why is it there now? And there are a number of things that could be causing the gender pay gap. And the one that's most commonly cited is discrimination, is that women are paid less for doing the same work as men. And that clearly used to be a relatively large factor in the past. It's one of the reasons why we have equal pay legislation, to make that illegal for employers to engage in. But as women have progressed, that's become less and less part of the story. A much bigger part of the story has become two really big factors. One, that women are tending to be in occupations that are lower paid. So there's differences in occupation, which we have to understand. But the really big one is differences in child rearing and childcare. You'll get people, particularly on the right, saying it's a myth. Once you control for education and occupation and time spent raising kids, the gap almost disappears. It goes down to, say, 3 percentage points, 4 percentage points. And that's true. But then the question is, well, why do we have that occupational segregation? Why are the women the ones taking the time out of the labour market to raise the kids? Maybe that's where the structural inequality is now. So it's not a myth, it's math, it's still there. But it's also not true, as many perhaps on the other side will claim, that it's evidence of purposeful discrimination. That's really not the main driver of it anymore, even though that's a popular explanation. You hear the gap and think, oh, there you go, there must be discrimination. But it's not really employer discrimination driving it now. It is these different patterns of work. So if we look at the earnings trajectories of men and women until they have children, they look very similar now. There's almost no difference. But then once they have children, women's earnings significantly decline relative to men. For women, having a child is the economic equivalent of being hit by a meteorite, whereas for men, their earnings continue to go up. They take more time out of the labour market to look after kids, especially when they're young. So most women with kids who aren't ready to go to school yet, so they're in the first 4 or 5 years of life, are either working part-time or not working. That's not true for the fathers. But almost to rub salt in the wounds, the very age at which most women are taking that time out of the labour market or going part-time, in one way or another slowing down or reducing their time in the labour market, turns out to be years that are really critical for career development, especially in certain careers. Just at the point where your career is starting to take off, you're taking on seniority, you're getting promoted into management roles and so on, that's when you take this hit. And so what that means is the impact of the time you take out of the labour market isn't just that time, it's the long run effect it's had on your career progression. So there is this double hit that predominantly women face in terms of having kids.
The first law passed by this administration is the Fair Pay Act, to remedy that court ruling. The Mitt Romney campaign put you out as a surrogate to shore up people's feelings about this issue after they could not say whether or not Mitt Romney would have signed that bill. You're supposed to make us feel better about it. You voted against the Fair Pay Act. It's not about whether or not you have a female surrogate. It's about policy and whether or not you want to fix some of the structural discrimination that women really do face that Republicans don't believe is happening.
It's policy, is the argument.
It's policy, and I love how passionate you are. I wish you were as right about what you're saying as you are passionate about it. I really do.
That's
For
really
example,
condescending.
No,
I mean, this is a stylistic issue.
I'll tell you what.
My passion on this issue
Here's a fact.
is actually me making
Can
a
I share
factual
one
argument on it.
Yeah.
Alex?
Well, the pay gap matters because diversity delivers results, and as long as women are not represented in senior roles and are paid less than men when they are, organizations will not be delivering the best results they could. And all the studies show that. Well, there are really two things that I think companies need to do. One is set a target, right? Because that's how we get things done in business, right? So if you want to move the needle on the number of women you have in senior positions, you have to know how many you have now and how many more you want to have 2 years from now. And the second thing is about transparency. So it's not enough to set a target. You've got to be transparent about what percentage of women do you have at the junior, middle, and senior levels of your organization, and what do you pay them versus men.
Some companies have radical policies in place already. This London-based recruitment consultancy, for example, has an open pay policy.
Women are still paid just over 10% less than men. And I would say the reason for that isn't that large organisations consciously decide they're going to pay women less than men. I don't think that happens very much now. But if they can get women cheaper than men, because when they're offering the salary they can get away with paying less, that problem is perpetuated. That can't happen here because female employees would know what their male counterparts are being paid. And I think they'd be rightly very upset about it if they realised that something was wrong.
But not all employers are prepared to act. So what can individual women do? It starts with their first job.
Really, if you don't ask, you don't get. So being bold, having the self-confidence to be able to negotiate, and a recognition that it's not just the final figure that is important. Actually, the whole package needs to be considered, particularly when the individual thinks about what they want to get out of their career over the long term.
What about women in the middle of their careers? How might they ask employers for more pay?
Make use of the statistics available to you. So use surveys such as CMI's Gender Pay Gap Survey that show what are you being paid, what are males being paid in your industry. If you expect that there's a discrepancy or suspect there's a discrepancy, talk to your line manager and say, I'm sure we don't have a problem here, but is there some data you could show me?
I think you need to work out what your value is, what your brand is, work out what you will deliver back to the business, and then be confident to go back, find those people in the business that you think need those skills, and get them to sponsor you and help fight your corner as well.
Absolutely go in knowing your worth and having done your homework.
Employers and governments know that closing the gender pay gap makes good business sense. But in the UK and elsewhere, it is unlikely that women will be paid as much as their male colleagues by next November.
Now, we know that women have made huge gains in education and in labor force participation over the past few decades. So why does the gender pay gap persist? There are a few reasons. First, women are more likely to work in lower paying fields such as caregiving and service sector jobs. A second factor, though it's harder to measure, is discrimination, and this has been shown in experimental research. And third, we know from time use data that in every country in the world, women still do far more unpaid work than men do. More cooking, more cleaning, more childcare, more elder care. And this hugely limits the time women can spend working outside the home, how much they can earn, and how far they can advance professionally, especially if they face inflexible work hours. OECD governments are tackling the problem through practical steps like equal pay legislation and pay transparency policies at companies. And these measures are helping. But if we really want to close the gender wage gap, we need to see it as part of a holistic approach to gender equality. This means offering, for example, more parental leave for fathers and good quality, affordable childcare and out-of-school supports. In the end, governments can really only ensure equal opportunities and equal pay for equal work by helping women and men have equal footing at home.
Given the main reason for the gender pay gap is this parenting gap, the amount of time that women versus men are putting into raising kids, that doesn't mean it's not a problem. It means it's a different kind of problem. And there are various things we should and can be doing to address it. Number one is to reduce just how big an impact taking time out of the labour market or working part-time has on your career. So much more generous paid leave, for example. The US is about the only country of advanced economies to not have federal paid leave. The second thing is we can redesign career ladders such that there isn't such a big impact as people just getting to that point where they're going to be promoted. So we have to redesign careers so that they are more compatible with flexibility. The other really big thing we have to do is both to encourage and enable fathers to do more of the work on the home front. It may well be true that going forward, women will still do more of the care in the very early years. I do think there's some evidence that that is a preference that women have, but that doesn't mean that they do it all the way through. There's a huge role for fathers all the way through parenting, including in adolescence.
Would you rather have a high-profile job for no pay or clean sewers for $100,000 a year?
A high-profile job with no pay.
I would prefer to have the high-profile job without pay.
I'm cleaning sewers for $100K, man. Ain't no shame in my game.
I'm cleaning sewers. There's no question about it.
I'm going to clean the sewers for $100,000 a year.
I'd rather the first one.
Okay, so wouldn't that explain why you're paid less?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to do...
Because I really don't want to do that.
You don't want to do the dangerous, dirty jobs.
No.
So could that possibly be why so many women earn less money than men?
Yep.
So is that based on discrimination or based on choice?
And choices.
Forget the choice of career an individual actually goes into. Forget about the number of hours individuals put in at the workplace. Forget about the fact that men are less likely to change jobs, take vacations, or retire early. Women are paid less for being women. Men are paid more for being men. Like, why not hire women, underpay them, then they don't have nothing else to compare themselves to, and turn serious profits.
We've got quite a large pay dispute happening with our Australian women's soccer team at the moment. Is it frustrating for you as someone who's so prominent in your sport? And we heard you say on the Ellen show the other day you are the richest fighter in UFC, that sort of thing is still going on?
I think that how much you get paid should have something to do with how much money you bring in. I'm the highest paid fighter, not because Dina and Lorenzo wanted to do something nice for the ladies. They do it because I bring in the highest numbers. They do it because I make them the most money. And I think that the money that they make should be proportionate to the money that they bring in.
Well, for example, men work an average of 44 hours a week. Women work 41 hours a week. Men go into professions like engineering, science, and math that earn more. Women want more flexible professions.
Listen, this is not a math is hard
No. Yes, it is, actually.
No, it isn't.
Well,
No, listen.
All right, let Rachel frame it, though, the way
Right
you
now,
laid it out.
women are making 77 cents on the dollar for what men are making.
But that's not true. If so,
let Rachel make her point.
Every greedy businessman in America would hire only women, save 25%, and be hugely profitable.
I feel like this is actually, I mean, it's weird that you're interrupting me and not letting me make my point, because we get along so well, so let me make my point.
I will.
But it is important, I think, the interruption is important, I think, because now we know, at least from both of your perspective, that women are not faring worse than men in the economy, that women aren't getting paid less for equal work. I think that's a serious basis, a difference in factual understanding of the world. But given that some of us believe that women are getting paid less than men for doing the same work, there is something called the Fair Pay Act. There was a court ruling that said the statute of limitations, if you're getting paid less than a man, if you're subject to discrimination, starts before you know that discrimination is happening, effectively cutting off your recourse to the courts. You didn't know you were being discriminated against, you can't go.
May I share one fact with you? When you look at, for example, single women working in America today between the ages of, I think, 40 and 64, who makes more, men or women, on average? Men make $40,000 a year. Women make $47,000. When you take out the marriage factor, look at some economics.
So do you take into account the fact that on average a male full-time employee works longer hours than a female full-time employee?
Not directly, no.
You don't?
But we annualise the part-time hours and those that have worked full-time but for part of the year. So that way, because at the moment, what I can tell you is women work part-time at 3 times the rate of men. So by annualising it, we are looking at a more realistic...
So you base it on annual salary.
Yeah.
What about if you did it on an hourly rate? What would be the gender hourly pay gap?
Well, we don't have that data, Senator.
You don't have that data?
No, because we ask for annualised salaries from our employers when they report their data in.
Okay, so if a woman was working fewer hours but earning the same rate per hour as a man doing the same job, would that show up as a gender pay gap?
No.
But, well, then in that case you are looking at hourly rates.
Janine Budov, Research and Analytics Executive Manager. So we do not collect the real hours that an employee might have worked. So what we do collect is the hours that are specified in a contract, and that is provided by organisations to us. If that makes sense.
Yeah. But I mean, do you annualise it on the assumption that men and women are working the same number of hours, or is it actual earnings?
It's actual earnings, and we are unable to. We don't have the data to distinguish or to then adjust for hours, because we cannot collect the real hours that employees are working.
So it's not possible to tell whether any or some of the gender pay gap is just simply attributable to a different number of hours worked. Is that right?
It depends on whether we're looking at hours that are in contract, or whether we're looking at hours that employees worked as overtime.
Why is it you don't look at hours worked? You don't collect it, but the ABS does. It's available.
The ABS does a survey, yes.
Every 2 years.
Yes.
But again, as I say, we collect census data, that is survey data. And the other thing I would say at this stage, Senator, is just because somebody might be sitting at their desk for 12 hours a day doesn't mean you're getting 12 hours of productivity out of them, and doesn't mean that they're working in essence any harder than someone that may sit at their desk for 8 hours. So I don't think...
That's true, but they're getting paid for the 12 whether they're doing any work, or they're getting paid for however many hours they're sitting at their desk. And the issue for your agency is that if it's a male sitting at a desk, they're getting paid more than a female sitting at a desk. So the question is whether irrespective of the hours, the question is whether for those hours for which they're getting paid, is there a difference between men and women? So
we don't collect information on ours, Senator.
ABS does, so it's available. So if we put in a question on notice, will you access the ABS data and so you can answer that question?
Well, I did answer it earlier. I said that the ABS employee and earnings and hours data, as at May 2016, the gender pay gap was 15.7%.
That, if I understood you correctly, it's referring to annualised salary, is that right?
Not.
What's the gap based on? Per hourly rates, or annual incomes, or annualised incomes, or what are we talking about here?
And no credible economist takes the gender pay gap seriously, as it's often explained as a single varied analysis where they take only one factor in, which is sex, and then take the average or median in the earnings of men versus women and point out that, look, there's a gap of earnings. You might as well say that long-haired people make less money than short-haired people based on that way of making an argument. The notion that you can pay people differently based on gender is not true and hasn't been true for almost 60 years because it's fucking illegal. The EPA, or the Equality Pay Act of 1963, was created to abolish any wage disparity based on sex. And it prohibits an employer to pay different wages to employees of the opposite sex if the employees perform substantially equal work on jobs requiring equal skill, effort and responsibility, and the work are performed under similar working conditions. So if you're a woman or a man for that matter and you find yourself in a situation where you earn less even though you work the same hours and have the same job, take them to court and sue them. Some people are even suggesting that there is an unfairness in pay among people who are self-employed. So I came across some pretty extreme examples that displays the absolute ignorance of what some highly influential people makes out the gender pay gap to be, and it's shared and posted by large media companies. Lily Singh, who has almost 15 million subscribers as of right now, is upset that she didn't make it into the top 10 highest paid YouTubers list, and even more so because of the fact that no woman made the list, claiming she wants equal representation. But let's be clear here, they don't even have a boss, but work for a company where the pay is solely based on performance and views. And she's now concerned because she thinks YouTube treats women unfairly. What the fuck? How does anyone make this a gender issue? YouTube doesn't pay out in bonuses or give creators money to make videos, at least that I'm aware of. The money comes from the ads you see before or in the middle of a video, and YouTube takes 32% of whatever that specific company paid to have their ad, while the creator takes 68%. And of course you can have equal representation on that list, but getting into a top 10 highest earner list is not something that is given but earned. You better be willing to work your balls off to get there. It's a mere representation of the hardest working, most entertaining people that manages to get the most amount of views. I don't understand how people create a debate out of this trying to make it a gender issue. It blows my mind. So a pretty interesting fact about business owners such as YouTube creators is that men and women seem to differ a bit in their motivations and values in running a business, according to CBS News. 76% of men's primary motivation for running a business is to make money, and only 29% of women share that primary motivation, as they value shorter work weeks, safety and fulfillment higher. And more power to you if you can manage to run a business while pretty much valuing freedom and happiness higher than just making money, right? It seems like a pretty great life. However, this results in women earning less on average than men that owns a business, and this is of course independent of discrimination since they don't have a boss. A 95-page study prepared for the US Department of Labor concluded that the raw wage gap should not be used as the basis to justify corrective action because there may be nothing to correct. And yet the media and influential people keep pushing this as facts. There are around 18 different factors you should take into account when making a credible analysis of the gender pay gap, and one of them is gender. If you factor in the other 17, it does in fact show that the gap does not exist. The reason why women earn less money than men on average seems to be mainly because of two things: choices and personality traits, which becomes evident in Scandinavian countries where equality of opportunity has gone further than anywhere else, and when people are left to make their own free choices, the disparity among men and women increase even more, something Jordan Peterson explains. Men and women are extremely similar in a lot of ways, but are also different in some ways. Women on average tend to be more interested in people, while men are more interested in things. And this seems to be the main reason for why women dominate the healthcare and education industry, while men outnumber women in STEM fields such as engineering and technology. And as Elon Musk once stated, you get paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of problems you solve. And even though being a teacher is an incredibly important job, more people are able to perform that task compared to being a high-level engineer, hence the difference in pay. And there's also a physical difference between men and women, which makes it more suitable for men to take on heavier and often more dangerous jobs, resulting in a higher pay. And these jobs consist of fishers, loggers, aircraft pilots, iron and steel workers, etc. And these are physically demanding jobs with a high risk of injury or fatality. And something that seems to go unnoticed is that men stands for roughly 95% of all work-related deaths. And so with high risk also comes high rewards. And just to be clear, these are all jobs women can get, but the vast majority choose not to.
The same kind of thinking that gets us to the argument that women are only given, the leadership of failing companies. They even have a term for it. They call it the glass cliff.
Whenever the situation is really, really bad, you call in the woman.
Women can break through the glass ceiling only to face situations with high risks of failure, Some people call it the glass cliff. Christine Lagarde, for example, becoming the ECB post, where she will face mounting challenges as she balances the various different competing demands between the Commission, the Parliament and the Council. Theresa May became Prime Minister in the wake of the Brexit referendum. She's only a matter of weeks away from being replaced. And Carol Bartz was named head of Yahoo in 2009, where she juggled sinking ad revenues and a slumping stock price out after 2.5 years. They all went for the job. It's not like they were dragooned and found. They all applied, fought hard to get to it. So what's the point?
Well, I think the point is that we need to make sure that we're utilizing and harnessing the power of women, and women are good for business. There are a lot of studies that show that gender diversity increases the value of a business and the financial results. But if women are only given the opportunity to lead glass cliff type situations where the probability for failure is extraordinarily high and it's heroism that enables success, then we really lose the opportunity to get the value of women.
I see that, but that's suggesting that somehow when these Hobbesian choices jobs come up, these phenomenally difficult, that the selection committee, usually men, only choose women because they think, well, why not? Because it's a fruitless task.
Well, wouldn't that be unfortunate?
Oh yes, right. But I'm saying, it would be a very unfortunate. But if its glass cliff exists, is it because no one else wants it, or those who are selecting think actually women have better talents? Which is it?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. So frankly, boards have to make a selection, and if they have a limited choice, they're going to take more risk and get the best risk that they think they can. And sometimes that's the only opportunity that a woman has to jump for it, and so she does. And there are a number of situations where that has been extremely successful. And if you look at Mary Barra at General Motors, if you look at a few years ago what Angela Ahrendts did at Burberry, if you look at a number of situations other than that, there are a lot of really successful situations as well. In fact, we looked at 57 women CEOs in our Women CEOs Speak study funded by Rockefeller that really showed an inordinately high capability set. In fact, when we looked at those 57 women against our best-in-class CEO norms, they scored at the 99th percentile or above. So it's not a strictly dismal story.
But does that mean they're being set up for failure? And if they are, and if they are being set up for failure, say for example Theresa May, she came in with one job to get Brexit done, and she's failed by her own definition. But Christine Lagarde has been a tremendous success at the IMF and World Bank, arguably less so as a finance minister of France.
Well, I think there are two issues at hand here. One is that when there are so few women in top leadership positions, they're a bit of an endangered species, right? There's 6% on the best year, and it's been 4 to 6% over the last 5 years, depending on what moment in time you look at it. And the fact is that these are scarce resources, and in the business world, if we were looking at other kinds of assets, we would want to leverage those, and we would want to make them count.
When a struggling organization hires a female executive to lead, she inherits a crisis. When this happens, a woman executive faces especially tough challenges. And when the mission at hand is too hard to accomplish, she can be forced out and replaced with a white male executive. And that's what researchers at PricewaterhouseCoopers call a glass cliff. Their study revealed that although there's a growing number of corporations that have hired female CEOs over the last 10 years, more of them are forced out of the executive suite than men, 38% versus 27%. Another study by Utah State University revealed that in a majority of cases, Fortune 500 companies replaced women and minority CEOs with white men. Out of 608 transitions that took place between 1996 to 2010, the study showed that women, or minority CEOs, replaced other non-traditional CEOs on only 4 occasions.
When there's a crisis situation and the company's not doing well, often the board wants a completely fresh perspective, different approach, different training, different industries, a whole new look and a whole new approach. And so they'll often go to the non-traditional CEOs, women or people of color.
Take a look at some of the biggest corporations in the world and you can spot the so-called glass cliff hires. Marissa Mayer at Yahoo, Meg Whitman at Hewlett-Packard, Mary Barra at General Motors, and Irene Rosenfeld at Mondelez were all appointed to help turn the companies around. While all of them have kept their lucrative positions, other female CEOs haven't been so lucky. Former Yahoo CEO Carol Bartz, former head of Merrill Lynch Smith Barney Sally Krawcheck, former co-president of Morgan Stanley Zoe Cruz, former Avon CEO Andrea Jung, and former Reddit interim CEO Ellen Pao have all been described as executives who fell off the glass cliff.
I was a vice president in the corporate world and I was brought in as a part of a turnaround scenario. And one of the challenges is when you're brought in to fix something, and yet the structure and the organization and the processes and the protocols and the policies are not going to support change, then you're not going to succeed because, again, you're not doing it on your own.
Christina Paxson is the president of Brown University, Drew Faust at Harvard, Elizabeth Garrett at Cornell, and Amy Gutman at University of Pennsylvania.
Some of the research shows that it will take till 2085 until there's gender parity in leadership. Another study said 2040, that's the year where incoming CEOs, a third of them will be women. My work with women, I have to say, I think it's going to take longer than that.
While many female academic leaders were appointed on merit and not necessarily to turn their institutions around, the pressure to stay at the top and avoid the cliff is as prevalent on campus as it is in a corner office.
The number of times very good women are asked to come in and clean up a very large mess left by, shall we say, a guy.
It's a phenomenon known as the glass cliff. It happens across the political spectrum and the corporate world.
When women break through the glass ceiling. When women do take on leadership positions, they do so in times of crisis.
It was actually Professor Michelle Ryan and her colleague who first coined the term, something she started researching in 2003.
Our research suggests that even though these women are taking on senior positions, they're doing so when things are difficult, when share price is plummeting, when there's a big reputational scandal, or it might be when there's great political upheaval. The chance of failing in these positions is really high as well.
Michelle Bullock has been appointed to resurrect the reputation of the RBA post Philip Lowe.
Big challenges ahead, but looking forward to it.
And Vanessa Hudson stepping up to clean up Qantas.
I hope she's got a big mop.
But statistically, women are as good, if not better, leaders. Organisations with women at the helm across key leadership roles added a market value of between 52 million and 70 million per year for an average-sized organisation.
It's not just CEOs of companies or prime ministers that face these, but we've had people say when you get an underfunded library, it's always a female head librarian, or in school systems, in areas that are underfunded, you see women in these leadership roles. It is something that women can face every day and at all different levels of leadership.
Women break through the glass ceiling only to fall off a glass cliff as their organisation or state or country faces a precipice.
Christine Holgate, the new Australia Post boss and the first female CEO in its 200-year history, takes on one of the most difficult roles in the country.
It's not just a phenomenon that affects individual women. What the glass cliff also does is reinforce gender stereotypes, that women aren't just very good at leadership. For more junior women coming up, it might actually turn them off from seeking leadership positions themselves.
Women leaders confront challenges researchers refer to as the glass cliff, and their chances of being unsuccessful in higher positions rise substantially. Many highly qualified contemporary CEOs have suffered this phenomenon. JCPenney CEO Jill Solta was out after just 2 years on the job. In addition, Marissa Mayer is CEO of Yahoo, and Carly Fiorina, as CEO of Hewlett-Packard, are also known to be victims of the glass cliff. Here are the 3 tips. Number 1, don't be afraid to say no. Women should be cautious in taking positions that seem too good, but not aligned with their skills, knowledge, and expertise. According to Amanda Markovich, saying no can be the ultimate form of self-respect. Instead, women need to follow examples of famous female executives such as Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg and YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki, who refused the offer to be Uber CEO in 2017. Number 2, define success before you take the job. Know what success means to you. Familiarize yourself with the company's expectations and demands. Conduct thorough research of the company's vision, goals, and objectives before accepting a position. And number 3, leave your ivory tower. Enhance linkages, collaborations, and a network of colleagues for constructive feedback and suggestions for improving the company and strengthening one's position in the company. Develop connections with mentors, former administrators, and employees of the organization. Good working relationships with the senior and current junior employees are vital, as they are responsible for implementing policies and procedures.
Like women are only given control of organizations when the organization is doomed to fail. So they want women to be given thriving organizations, then they start lecturing us how femininity is important for leadership. Interesting that they always want to associate success with femininity, but they disassociate failure with femininity and push for individualism. This is the same thing they'll tell you with gender-based violence, especially femicide, that it's the murder of women just because of their gender.
Allow me to begin by sending our heartfelt condolences to the families and loved ones of those who have lost their young girls, their women, and the many who we are yet to know about because the cases are unreported. As you have rightly mentioned, we have very worrying statistics coming out of cases that have been reported. On average, as FIDA Kenya, when we look at the statistics we have been collecting since 2020, 2021, 2022, we are looking at an average of 50 cases that are reported in a year of specific femicide. You break it down to the weekly statistics, it means at least every week we are having 1 or 2 cases of reported publicly known cases of femicide. We cannot continue like this. It's not even so much a conversation about femicide, it's about safety. It's about the security of more than half of this nation, which should worry everyone, including those in the highest esteemed offices. Break it down to the traditions and the cultural stereotypes, where often if a wife reported that her husband has violated her, the first question would be, what did you do? You must have upset him. So that has now graduated to social spaces. We are having a lot of our young people interacting on social media. And so that's where the problem starts. And it is indeed very worrying, because looking at the cases that have happened in the most recent past, they're really gruesome. Yeah. No one deserves to die in that manner.
No one deserves to die in that manner. And I want to draw your attention, Anne, to the victim blaming. And many comments have been shared online, blaming victims for their deaths. For some, it is, why were you in this particular situation? Others labeling women as, you know, soliciting for favors from men and therefore calling this upon themselves. There's also the blanket condemnation of men. So it goes either way.
Yes.
So the debate online is that, what did you do to deserve this? Now, in terms of victim blaming, when you look into that and the ripple effect of that for the victims, what then happens? You're saying most of these victims are attacked by persons that are known to them, that are close to them. So when this victim shaming happens, what message does that send out to potential victims, or to victims who find themselves in such situations?
One of the things we see, as you rightly said, is that the victim shaming brings a stigma of reporting, stigma of getting help, stigma of response, because we operate within a community. So when we have women being blamed, it means we are already clouding any intervention that should be there to assist them. We start questioning, as you said, what were they doing? And again, going back to the issue, Lillian, it has nothing to do with who the victim was.
Further, the National Police Service is yet to issue a comprehensive statement on the circumstances that led to his escape and steps towards his rearrest and prosecution.
Now the organizations want this issue addressed by the highest office in the land.
The president should officially declare femicide a national crisis and a disaster, assuring the public that his administration is working actively to protect women and girls across the nation.
Besides that, the organizations also want the president to appoint a gender cabinet secretary, provide adequate updates on investigations into femicide cases, and take concrete action to address overall gender-based violence. In the meantime, the organizations say they will be taking the battle to the legal fields.
Let us rethink femicide as a crime, as a standalone crime, because what is happening is that some of these suspects, when they are arraigned in court, they are charged with the normal, murder.
The government has 30 days to act or face protests by women and girls that will be organized by these human rights organizations.
Like, just forget about the fact that most homicide victims, upwards of 90%, are men, hence necessitating coming up with a new term to make the murder of women more serious, like their lives are more valuable. Granted, most murderers are men, and men are disproportionately murdered, but majority of slut-shaming against women is by fellow women, basically a class war among women. Does that stop women from talking about slut-shaming?
Slut-shaming. Female promiscuity has a tragedy of the commons effect in the mating market. One woman offers jobs on the second date, harder for other women to keep them in reserve until the fourth date as their special treat. This creates a downward spiral of young women feeling like they have to offer more sex to more guys just to stay in the mating game. Thus, slut-shaming is a way of enforcing a more restrained sexual norm on other women so that not all women have to become more promiscuous than any one of them would like. That blew my mind.
Unless you have this kind of game theory perspective, it's really hard to understand why slut shaming is mostly done by women to other women.
It also makes a lot of sense around why women tend to be the enforcers of slut shaming, because women are the ones who have an incentive to protect the sexual marketplace from becoming a price war of easy sex.
And this is also why the main opponents of sex work are often married women, because they have the most to lose. If you just ask what's the incentive to impose a certain social norm on human sexuality, often it's not that hard to figure out why it's happening.
Has HR being a female-dominated industry stopped women from complaining about the gender pay gap or discriminatory hiring practices? Forget about the fact that when men and women choose to killing people, they disproportionately choose to kill men. Forget the fact that men are more susceptible to violence from a stranger, including on the streets. People just go around killing women for being women? This just goes hand in hand with the whole nothing justifies a narrative that accompanies anything related to female victimhood, essentially beginning the conversation at the point of convenience for women like these things happen in isolation.
Somebody said to me some years ago, why do you call yourself a feminist? Why don't you just say that you're a humanist? And I said, calling myself a feminist, of course, doesn't mean that I don't realize that everyone in the world has suffered, men have suffered. But I think it's my recognition that women and girls have historically been excluded, diminished, oppressed. And to call myself a feminist is to say that we need to do better collectively. I think that there is an epidemic of male entitlement towards female bodies. It's a global epidemic. And it's something that we need to address. It's also about how we as a society react to girls and women talking about assault. And it's not just men. I think it's also important for all of us to acknowledge that it's men and women that seek to silence women and girls who talk about their experiences. We live in a culture that diminishes women, and so both men and women participate in that culture. Men need to hear women's stories. And maybe if we have more men hearing women's stories, maybe we can start getting ahead in that idea that men are not entitled to women's bodies.
Part of why they're always yelling nothing justifies is that they know before they tell men to stop being entitled to women's bodies, they ought to be telling women to stop being entitled to men's money, because more often than not, these things go together.
I'm not going to downgrade my lifestyle because me and you are no longer together. And I just feel like if you put me in this space and that was under your budget then, what's the difference now? You know what I mean?
You were my girlfriend. I was fucking you.
But see, what he did was this, though. He gave you the upgrade,
But part of that upgrade is because you're with me.
Yes.
You understand? So let me just go though. So we didn't work out, me and you dating. You feel me? So I'm supposed to keep paying your loft and keep paying your bins. I want him to keep your lifestyle up, keep paying your bills, keep you on that same upgraded level. No, you were dating a man that had money, so dating him came with a lifestyle. But if we not working and our love is dead, I don't owe you to keep paying your car note and your mortgage.
So he knows I'm going to lunch.
He knows you're
He
going
knows
to
my vibe. He knows how I like to move, and he only sent $30.
I'm not gonna bend over backward for a man that is just sending whatever he can. But if I'm talking to him, next time I'm out and he says, "Oh, you need something for lunch," I'm gonna tell him it's okay. Somebody already sent me $100.
Okay. If we're being completely honest, right here, right now, we've all eaten lunch for $30. Yes, let's start
100%.
Wait, cute little cafe spot, baby.
I'm getting lunch for $17.
I'm gonna snap us and get something popping, but
we're not saying that we're ungrateful.
Right.
Food is food on the table. However, you know what the standard is.
Correct.
Me in that situation, handling it with grace. Thank you so much, baby. I'm so appreciative. I'm gonna still take a picture of that bill and I'm gonna send it to him. Thank you for the 30. That was the tip.
Also, men, if you know that you cannot give $30 or if it's hard for you to give, then you need to date within
Don't
your...
date.
You can date. No, you can.
Do not date.
But date with the woman that, number one,
date.
does not have that expectation, or number two, it's in that range.
If your wife can spend more than you make, like you need to make more monies, 150 maybe to 250,000 a year would be comfortable for sure. The more the merrier. But
300,000, like I guess if they made less than that, I feel like we wouldn't have the lifestyle I wanted, so I would work. Like life's expensive.
Anywhere from 70 to 100K.
I would have to say 127.
$500,000. Is that bad?
Probably 150 to $250,000 a year.
Ideally, my husband needs to be making like $650,000.
Kiara, are you going to address the scamming accusations?
This is what they're referencing. You said, quote, I know guys when they're lonely and when they don't have a good family situation, they're vulnerable. So I just know what kind of people to target. I'll ask them how's life and let them open up. And when they open up, that's when I know that I can take something from them. The woman being recorded, I guess this is you, admitted to scamming at least 7 men, including one with a disability. No. One allegedly gave her his life savings of more than $30,000 after she said she had a growth in her kidney.
No, it's not true.
Well, there's a recording of it, apparently.
But that was from like 3 years ago. I was just in a very bad place.
Wait, so it's not true or it happened 3 years ago?
I was just going through a mental breakdown. I was going through a lot of things in life. After that, I went for therapy and I'm in a better place now. So I didn't say those things like I mean it at all.
But what would you say to an audio recording of I know what kind of people to target when they open up? That's when I know I can take something from them. How could I misconstrue that?
If I wanted to take you on a first date, would Pizza Hut be okay?
It depends.
What would it depend on?
How much I like you. It would depend.
So for the guys who you like the least amount, where would you want them to take you?
Like a 5-star steakhouse.
And the guys you like the most, where would you go with them?
I would probably expect less, just because I like them.
But why make the man that you like the least amount invest more up front than the guys who you're more attracted to?
Because he's got to work for it. Since I like him the least amount, he's got to work for it. At least I'm giving him a chance.
You're the prize in a relationship.
Duh. Exactly. Why wouldn't we be?
But the more attractive guy, he's a prize to you.
Not really. They're never a prize. No. I believe the woman's always a prize. Man should work for a woman.
And what should a woman do for a man?
Oh, that's a good... That's a good question. Care and love. Yes. Offer support and love.
Anybody trying to date me, my bills or your bills, care whose car it is, you're trying to date me. You're trying to take a load off of me. So my car is your car for the bills. I don't simple. You're trying to date me, so my bills are your bills. Period.
So let me get this straight. I'm supposed to chase you and knowingly know it's other competitors that's chasing you too, just to compete to see at the finish line, the winner gotta pay your bills? I think the fuck not.
However, they believe that women's entitlement to men's money, objectifying men, equals women knowing their worth, but it's extremely demeaning for men to objectify women, basically reducing them to the value of their bodies.
The safety for the Nigerian woman and the Nigerian girl starts from the basics. Seeing us as human. That's it. When it starts from the moment the Nigerian girl is seen as a human deserving of equal rights, opportunities, and protection. Because when you don't see, when women are not seen as fully human, that is what prompts the entitlement that men and boys have been raised to walk around with. That entitlement that a boy has been raised with, it starts from when you're little. So you're in this playground in primary school, and the boy pulls your hair and pushes you and breaks your pencil, and you go to report to the teacher. Oh, he's just playing with you. Rather than reprimand him for being a bully, they say he's playing with you. It is that male entitlement that makes, the society decide that a woman has no agency over her own body. It is that lack of agency, that lack of, they don't see us as fully human. And so they want to take over our bodies. They feel they have a right to our bodies. That is what breeds sexual assault and rape. That is what breeds, that is the root cause of sexual harassment.
They want women to keep knowing their worth, basically keep being entitled to men's money, without men being entitled to anything. Commercialize dating, give women whatever they want, and just when men are about to collect, then entitlement is wrong. In heterosexual interactions, men see women as sex objects, while women perceive men as success objects. Otherwise put, money is the primary lens through which women look at men, while sex is the primary lens through which men look at women. It's either both are wrong, or none is wrong. Either men and women be entitled or no one is entitled. It's like, she's entitled to commitment just for being in a relationship, but nothing you ever do will even make you entitled to getting laid, including marriage, because one-time consent doesn't guarantee lifetime consent. You can't say men should be allies, that they should be part of telling their brothers X, Y, Z, while still believing in the all-men narrative. Women will literally interact with the same men and go, it's all men, because virtually every woman has a story.
We're all fucking the same men. There's like 20% of men that are sleeping with 80% of the women.
Put yourself in this position. So you're on a dating site and you find someone, and this might even be more powerful initially for women than for men. Because I don't know if you know this, but women rank 85% of men as below average in attractiveness. Now, men get their revenge, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make a case that, women are more demented when it comes to men than men are when it comes to women. It's just they're demented in different ways. It's interesting because I've watched my daughter go through Tinder. It's sort of painful. It's like, nope. And she kind of thinks it's funny. And I suppose it is, but it's cruel as hell, right? If all these poor Weasley guys, they're just getting sorted into the you should not be in the damn mating pool pile. Right, and that's a fundamental judgment. You should not be in the mating pool.
Very average-looking women would be on there requesting men who make over $100,000, who are over 6 feet. They want like a $200,000 engagement ring. The list of demands is just outrageous, right? Is every woman like that? No. I hope that from my channel you've gathered that not every single woman is looking for those things, but a lot of women have crazy unrealistic standards on their list of requirements, right? Nothing new. To show that some women may be operating on a very different scale, OkCupid shared some pictures of men who are fine looking. Some might say cute even, but that women have rated them as significantly less attractive than the so-called medium. Oh, first guy? 7, super cute. Cute, 7. 6. Probably 5.5. That's still medium. Okay, maybe none of them are Ryan Gosling, but if they weren't Ryan Gosling, would you still rate them high on the hot meter? From this, one might think that it's the female, not the male, who has unrealistic standards of what average men should look like. It seems like women are way beyond picky. Women think most men are ugly, or specifically here, 80% of men are ugly. So I've been seeing this a lot lately on TikTok, on YouTube. I haven't really watched any videos about it, but I've seen some like thumbnails pop up and some different creators make videos about this topic specifically.
I don't know if this is just me, but like I rarely ever see attractive men out anywhere. I don't even go out that much at night, but when I do, I never see any.
I swear, some of you girls have like no creativity. Because this girl starts off the video with, I don't know if it's just me, like you didn't see this video from this girl who literally says the same thing, or this girl who I already made a video on, or this one that went super viral by Ty Yummy. I just wanted to show this one where this girl goes on a rant about how women don't actually even care that much about looks at all. So when she's not making 8 different videos on the dating coach that wants nothing to do with her, her second option is just taking videos that have already gone viral. But I'll answer your question, which most people already answered in the comment section. But let's start with number 1. Men don't wear makeup. Coming online being like, yeah, I don't see any attractive men out there while you're wearing a full face of makeup and your whole entire account is literally you always wearing makeup because you're too insecure to show what you actually look like without it, is like somebody saying like, you guys should make more money as he's accepting a credit card from his parents. This girl doesn't have a single time that she ever turns on her camera and presses record when she's not wearing full makeup. Then they really have the audacity while doing that to sit there and say, yeah, I never see any attractive men out there. Here's the logic behind that. Just because you claim you don't see any attractive men, that doesn't deny that there's still probably attractive men around you. I'm going to use a different example that I did last time, okay? So let's say I get really used to hanging around like basketball players and professional athletes. So when I pass a guy who's 6'4", I go, that guy's not really that tall. I never see any tall guys. You know, when I'm walking the street, I never see anybody tall because I'm so used to hanging around people who are 6'8" all the time. Just because I believe that doesn't change the fact that that guy is clearly a tall individual. Just because you have very high standards for what you expect a good-looking guy to look like, because God knows how you got that, whether it's from social media or, you know, TV shows or what you got that from, doesn't change the fact that there's probably good-looking men passing you throughout the whole day. That could possibly be one of the many reasons why that girl wouldn't stop talking about the dating coach that she dated, because maybe it was one of the few good-looking men who ever showed interest in her.
Okay, so women find 80% of men unattractive, says crazy study. So this says women are often thought of as picky, especially where men are concerned. True, we all know that from being on my channel and talking to different women. Some single women are known to have lists of characteristics that their ideal man must possess, like great abs, a sense of humor, a 6-figure income, and a nice car. Sounds about right, give or take some, depending on the woman.
So we feel like men are bad, but we have to understand that it's not men that are bad. It's women that have lied to themselves and given us these fairy tales from the media and from Disney movies and from all these things that have given us this fairy tale ending with one man being faithful to one woman and them living happily the fuck ever after. And that does not exist anymore. The men that are out there, they're not bad. It's just that we have lied to ourselves into believing that they're behaving in a certain way that's not good. But they're just behaving in a certain way that fits the dating market.
True.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is, so what happens, this is problematic, and this is not a moral judgment, but as women, you guys know there's a physical attractiveness that you have, and men react a certain way. Maybe when you were younger, you came to this realization. And then when you come to the realization, there's like this peak at what you can get a guy's attention from, and then this peak at what you can get a guy to wife you up or to be in a relationship. Right. And then there's a peak at which guy you can get to be faithful. Does that make sense? That's true. And and I hate to stratify humans this way, but let's say the guy you can get is a 10. Like, let's just say Chris Brown, he'll have sex with you one night in the back of some club, right? At the backstage, it's some shit. And then you can get this other guy who's like a lawyer, and he'll be with you, but he's not going to be faithful. And we'll say he's an 8. And then there's the guy who will be faithful, and he's like a 6, but you won't tolerate a 6.
Beta males.
Yeah, you won't tolerate a 6, because the 3 of you, I guarantee you I could find dudes who would not cheat on you. The problem is there's going to be something about them that doesn't quite, so it becomes this issue of a supply and demand curve where it doesn't quite work. And the 3 of you are attractive. I have no doubt whatsoever that here's where my best friend, her name's CJ Sparks, and she had a meeting with Kevin Samuels. And when Kevin Samuels told her straight up, she's like, you're in pretty prison. Like, you are a playmate. So the guys that you could sleep with are like up here, way the fuck up here. Mm-hmm. And then the guys who would actually settle, they don't have quite as many options. And you get into this weird situation. And I know from being on both sides, from being a military officer stuck in the Middle East for 6 months and not being able to see a single woman, to living in Las Vegas and hosting the biggest bikini competition in the world. One, I had no options. The second one, I had a ton of options. And in those 2 cases, I'm just going to tell you, as you move up the scale, and there's studies that show this. Satoshi Kanazawa wrote a book called The Intelligence Paradox about this. As you go up the income scale, as you go up the height scale, and if you go up the IQ scale, the likelihood of a man staying faithful just drops. It gets as you go higher and higher and higher. Women have a delusion when they go on dating apps and they left swipe on 600 men. And in their mind, they think I'm better than these men and I could get all of these men or some of these men or most of these men to commit to me in a long-term relationship, not recognizing that this app is only for short-term sexual access. So what's happened is you're set up to be born, go through puberty, like go through adolescence, go through puberty, young adulthood, then find someone who's around your same age. There's maybe 8 to 10 people in that age group that you're possibly able to. This is, by the way, this is the reason why men have approach anxiety when they come up to talk to strange women. Is because there was only maybe 8 to 10 women in your tribe that you had the ability to go talk to. And if you screwed up with one of them, you were going to die a virgin. We look at the chromosomes or the chromosomal records for men and women, and we find out about 40% of men have procreated throughout history and 80% of women. There's a lot of men, probably more than half of men who've ever been born died virgins. So when you realize that, it's like, okay, that's where the approach anxiety comes from. So now just think about everything I said. And now let's take these same Homo sapiens who haven't really developed that much, and then let's give them access to infinite numbers of men and women that they can look at on social media. So now we have certain studies that show women will left swipe 600 times for every one time they right swipe to go on a date with a guy. Women will do something like 16,000 swipes to go on 10 dates. There's a one TikTok video of a gentleman. He did 1 million with an M, million right swipes and went on 2 dates. That was it, from million. And he was an average looking guy. And then you see these women, they'll go on there and they'll say things like, well, I think Ryan Gosling is mid. I think he's average, right? You'll see stuff like that. So when you go on these dating sites and you actually survey the women on there, they report 80% of men on these sites to be below average attractiveness. Well, mathematically, that's kind of hard to do. 20% of these men, they say these 20% of men are attractive. And then the top 4.5% of men are so attractive that women pursue. When you go look at the right swipe counters, you'll see the top 10% of men get 63% of the right swipes. That's almost one standard deviation of women that go to 10% of men. The top 20% of men get 83% of the right swipes. And this is the crazy one. The top 40% of men get 96% of the right swipes, which means the bottom 60% of men are competing for 4% of women on dating apps. And so when you see that, what's happened is men have become delusional because, and I know a lot of people get offended when I use this word, but men have become delusional when it comes to these non-contextualized images they see in pornography that have caused men to believe that women act that way and look that way. And unless you live in Las Vegas, they don't look that way. And so they get to the point where they start believing that they can get women that they don't possibly have a chance with. This is when you see the supermodel who gets the pics from the hundreds of guys, stuff like that. Just utter and complete nonsense. So the guy who's sneaking in your DMs, I want to see Bob's and vagine, that kind of stuff. Where do those tropes come from? They come from men shooting their shot. Men have what's called an overperception bias, according to Dr. David Buss. He's an evolutionary psychologist. Women, they have a delusion. And again, I know this word is offensive to a lot of people, but women have a delusion when they go on dating apps and they left swipe on 600 men. And in their mind, they think I'm better than these men and I could get all of these men or some of these men or most of these men to commit to me in a long-term relationship, not recognizing that this app is only for short-term sexual access. And so the problem is, and not to say certainly some people get into long-term relationships from Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge, but for the most part, what we see with Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, Raya, eHarmony, and OkCupid is we see a lot of guys in there really looking for short-term sexual access. And in almost all of those apps, we see 3 to 6 times as many men as women. In India, it's like 11 men for every woman, something like that. And by the way, when you pay for those boosts on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge, it's 9 guys for every 1 girl. And so it's just one of these situations where we've got to the point where women believe because they fucked a 10 that they can get a 9 to commit. Right? They had sex with a movie star. They had sex with like celebrity at a party or whatever. And so they believe that they can get this guy who's like the super hot bartender in their city to commit to them. And they can't because they don't understand the concept between short-term dating and long-term dating. And then there's men who are delusional because they keep looking at non-contextualized images of women in bikinis on Instagram and because they keep looking at pornography. And then you end up with guys under the age of 21 with erectile dysfunction. So what's happened, the short and to the point answer, what you're saying is it's an evolutionary mismatch. We were not designed biologically for the current environment that we're in. We have what's called the dilemma of perceived choice, or the perceived dilemma of choice, because we don't really have as many choices as we think we do.
If random men actually walked up to random women on the streets and killed them like they do men, wouldn't it actually reflect in the statistics? This video should not be taken as a generalization because we always leave that to the feminists and like-minded people. Granted, every situation is different. We live with serial killers out here, which is why the law exists, and some of these people receive some of the harshest judicial punishments, and it is completely justified. Arguing that every woman who lost their life in the hands of a man was because she was a woman is no different from arguing that these women lost their lives because they got themselves into dangerous situations. Both of them are wrong. In a utopia, no one deserves to die, but we don't live in a utopia, we live in the real world, and there are some really twisted people out here. When you tell men to tell their brothers anything, remember, sisters are urging their sisters to be more entitled. In these situations, the difference between the perpetrator and the victim is their gender. When you tell men to tell their brothers, remember, the knowledge of prison for a long time, or even the possibility of being sentenced to death doesn't deter some of these psychos. Granted, women being the victims means they can't be told anything, but with the knowledge of what could happen if a woman finessed a man, women still believe it's their right to finesse men. How would you solve the friction between the sexes if whatever you encourage in one sex is the same one you condemn in another?